I like the word exclusively prepared for, and this is true. I finished this about 2:30 this morning. I had done a lot of the work ahead of time and wrote on a ship, but I had not had a chance to compile it, and then things got really busy. We lost 4 hours of sleep. We were doing star watching every night, and so I really didn't have time to focus on that until this presentation, until yesterday afternoon. And so sort of a mishmash of thoughts about whales. And one of the neat things about the Azores is that most people have it as a stopping off point when they cross the Atlantic Ocean. Because not a lot of people realize just how many whales come here, and actually how many whales are resident species of the Azores. The first couple times I came to the Azores, I hadn't been aware that there were a lot of whales in the area. And indeed, this has become one of the world's top whale watching areas. And my hope is that tomorrow morning, early in the morning, perhaps with a beautiful, gentle sunrise, we're going through perfectly flat waters, and we'll be able to see a whole bunch of whales as we move towards the island of Terceira. And then similar the next morning, when we go to San Miguel, we'll pass it through whale watching areas. And I hope that I can show you that visually on this presentation. And basically, if you know your whales, then this will be fairly simple for you in terms of identification, but I'm really good at looking out at the ocean and seeing a mammal out there and being able to determine whether it's a whale or a dolphin. And that's about it. So hopefully we'll be able to start to identify them a little more carefully according to their species names. But I'm happy with whale and dolphin, and I just love seeing them, and it's so nice to try and capture them on film. I've always loved that shot ever since it was first developed by NASA. It's the Earth taking, of course, without cloud cover, and it took about 1,200 photographs to get that particular image done. And what's interesting about this is that you really cannot see any cities, towns. You can't see much of the impact of humans on the planet. You can't see any roads leading from one city to another. And also, when you look at the ocean, you can't really see anything except the blueness of the seas. But in reality, as you know, we have myriad roadways going all through all the continents except Antarctica. And underneath the sea, we have the same sort of thing. We have these superhighways. And these streaking lines represent the various pathways of whales that have been tracked by satellite, showing where they have moved to and where they have come from. And it's pretty fascinating. If you've had the opportunity to be down towards Antarctica, especially in this part here, which is the most popular area for cruise ships to go, you can see that a number of whales migrate down the west coast of South America into the area north of the Antarctic Peninsula. And the whales in this area here originate from over here in Asia, south of Australia. They come down to Antarctica and work along this coastline that these ones do here. We're more concerned today with this area here, but many of us have been on the west coast, and this sort of tracks the movement of whales from their southerly locations in their wintertime, where they come down to stay warm, they breed, and they give birth. And over here in Hawaii, of course, you're probably familiar with whales. And in the summertime, they move towards the north, towards the Aleutian Trench, towards Alaska, towards the west coast of British Columbia, and the west coast of North America. But again, our focus is here. This is where the Azores are located. And you can see that a number of whales track through the Azores. And it's because of that we're going to be able to see, hopefully, a number of whales from the ship as we move into Terceira tomorrow, and as we move into San Miguel the next day. So here's where we're going to be tomorrow. We're coming sort of in this direction here, and then up to Terceira Island right there. And then this is San Miguel here, and whales cluster mostly in this area. So hopefully it'll be very interesting. So here's some of the whale traps. This is just enlargement of the previous shot. And in the Azores, surprisingly, there are six resident species of cetacean. And if I could count that, it would be 5. One of them is a whale, a sperm whale, which is one of the most magnificent animals on the planet. And then there's 4 species of dolphin that live in the Azores along with the sperm whales year-round. So they don't go from point A to point B on the planet. Instead, they live at the Azores, they breed at the Azores, they feed at the Azores, they give birth at the Azores. And then there's a number of migratory species. And some of those names may be familiar to you. Can everybody see those? Okay, sorry. The pilot whale, the striped whale, blue whale, minke whale, fin whale, sei whale, humpback, beach whale, orcas, false killer whales, Brydes whales. Notice that the wording, this is the spelling, B-R-Y-D-E-S, but it's pronounced Brydes, and the pygmy whales. So those are all migratory species that over the course of the spring will move through the Azores. The migration routes, quite often whales will move from the home winter base, if you will, down here off the northern coast of Hispaniola, and they'll move up along the west coast of the eastern seaboard of the US. And then others will move from there, from Hispaniola, up into the St. Lawrence River to the Saguenay Fjord around Tadoussac, and spend their entire summers in this area here. Others will move into the Bay of Fundy. Still others move along the coast, past Newfoundland, up between Greenland and Baffin Island, and into the Arctic waters of the Canadian archipelago. Others move along the east shore of the Atlantic Ocean, from Cape Verde Island down this region here, up along the coast, and all the way up to the Svalbard Islands, and up by Greenland. Others will take a detour, and this has been tracked by a migratory satellite. They'll take a detour at the Azores and then continue their way up. And then others come from the Caribbean, head right towards the Azores, stop for a few days, and then move towards the north. So there's some good movement of whales through the Azores, which is fortunate for us, because we're sort of migratory species in a way that we'll be spending just 2 days there. And the timing for us could not be better, because these migrations take place mostly from the end of March until the middle of June. This was a survey done, again, with satellite tracking, showing the different routes that whales have taken from the Azores moving towards the north. The 3 whales that are mentioned here, in green, the sei whales, the blue whale, and the red fin whale. Of course, the blue whale is the largest animal on our planet, and it's certainly the largest whale. So one of the difficulties, as I mentioned, is being able to try and identify the whales. Again, good with whales versus dolphins, because that's sort of the range of my abilities. And when we try and look for ways to identify the whales, quite often all we see when we're looking out is we usually just see the backside of a whale and very little more. And that makes it extremely difficult to identify what the species is. Now in this case, the dorsal fin here is very prominent, which is a clue, but many times you just see the backside, something like that. And that's tricky to identify. And unless you're familiar with the different types of dorsal fin, if this is all you see, it makes the identification of whale very difficult. Now, this was not taken at the Azores, obviously. But this is a minke whale, and again, it's just to show that this is often the only part that you see, and unless you're familiar with it, you would probably be able to identify that as a minke. That's the fin whale. And of course, when you see that, because of the prominence of that dorsal fin, you know exactly what species that is. So there's just basically one species that has such a prominent backside you can identify it immediately. Again, how do you distinguish the one on the right? How do you identify the one on the left? And if you're fortunate enough to see the rear end of a whale, this is a shot taken from the back of the whale. This is the dorsal fin right here. And this is the upraised back of the whale. And the water has streamed from the bow towards the stern of this whale. And I just thought it was such a fabulous photo showing how the water is streaming off the backside. But again, if that's all you saw, it's difficult to identify. So of all those pictures we saw, that one right away you knew what it was. But the other ones, maybe you do, but probably you don't. We can use the fins as well, the dorsal fin and the pectoral fins, to help identify the different species. So here's a good example of an orca, but I just wanted to point out where the dorsal fin is located relative to the pectoral fins. Pectoral is sort of like the arms. So here, if you're up on deck 10, for instance, sometimes the whale passes close by the ship, you can see the pectoral fins. This whale is characterized by its long fins. These pectoral fins here, it's between 12 and 14 feet in length. And this, of course, is the humpback whale. Sorry, this should say dorsal. That's what happens when you work at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, what a lovely setting for that. That's off the coast of Norway. Again, the dorsal fin. This particular species, and hopefully we'll see a few of them, the wrinkled skin is very much characteristic and helps you to identify what that is, and that's a sperm whale. And if you're out whale watching in a small boat like that, and this gigantic whale comes out of the water, it's pretty impressive to see. That's the largest whale on the planet. And that's a rarity, but dolphins do that, whereas whales tend not to. Whales will do that, but dolphins will do that on a very regular basis. To see a whale do that is extremely rare and quite fortuitous if you're lucky enough to see it. But again, the dorsal fin, when you can see that, it helps you to identify the species. Now, if those two clues didn't help you, then sometimes you have to use the blowholes. And quite often, that's the only thing you see. You just see the blow from a distance. You know it's a whale, but you can't identify it. But if you're really good, you can identify the shape of the blow, and then it will tell you the species responsible. That's the same picture we just saw, right? Sorry, I never have the same picture. Sorry. you see the blow right away, often they have a characteristic shape, and that's a function of here, the nostrils. Some whales have a single blowhole, some have a double blowhole, as is the case here. That's a double blowhole. And sometimes you'll see two distinct plumes coming out, or else they'll merge very quickly into one. It depends on the orientation of the blowhole. And if you see the blowhole from this whale, it is characteristic, you can identify it right away because it's the only whale that has an offset nose, if you will. This here, this blowhole, its nose is located on the left side of the whale. So every time it blows, the blow comes out to the left side of the whale. Can you see how it's here at the left? And if those don't help you, the flukes can be identified. Each species of whale has a different fluke, a different tail. Again, how fresh would that be? And sometimes that perfect tail fluke isn't so perfect because it's been chewed. This whale has been attacked a number of times by orcas trying to get it. And the fortunate thing for whales is that they have a powerful tail fluke. They have great musculature just before the tail. And if you get slapped by a tail fluke, and I was surprised by this, but orcas will attack the whales. They'll move around such a position, the whales move around such a position that they can slap the head of the orca. And it creates a stunning blow. And even though you think it's in water, you can't imagine how quickly the tail can come through the water and cause a blow, but apparently it does. And apparently it can move through the water really quickly, as fast as a punch in the air. And this is a tail fluke on the side. So here would be the other side of the tail fluke. And of course, if you're a photographer, you're looking for that beautiful tail fluke shot. But you can see how powerful the musculature is here, right in front of the tail. So it's very powerful muscle controlling the tail, which provides propulsion as well as defense to the whales. And then if that's not enough to help you identify the whales, then some of the things that the whales do give you a clue. There's a number of different names associated with the different activities. And as you know, this is called a breach. That's a lunge. That's a head lunge, because the head and the upper part of the front part of the whale is below the water. And that's not quite a lunge, but this is a sei whale on its side feeding. And these whales are in the Azores. All the whales I'm showing in this presentation have been found in the Azores. And that's just the whale skimming along the surface of the water. And this was taken in Alaska. There's a gentleman on a ferry crossing, and he just happened to have his camera ready, and this minke whale leaped out of the water. And so there's no real name associated with that, so we'll just call it the leap. Parallel leap. Isn't that amazing? So lunges. Quite often the whales will come out of the water and then drop back down to check things out, to look around. Often they swim on their sides. This one eye is up, looking around to see what's going on. reach with the orcas because they're shorter, their body doesn't angle the same way a humpback does. And this is the pilot whale. Obviously it's a toothed whale. And what it's doing right now is it's mimicking the sounds of other whales in the area. And the pilot whale is pretty bright because it can also mimic the sounds of small fish or make a sound that attracts small fish to it. But when there's an orca whale around, perhaps considering having this as its meal, this whale here can make sounds identical to what the orca whale is doing and indeed scare the orca whale off. But it's amazing, this is known as a mimicker of the ocean, and that's a pilot whale. This activity is called sly hopping, where in this case a sperm whale comes out of the water and sometimes rotate around to see what's in the area. Humpbacks are famous for doing that activity. This is a lunge by a beaked whale. And there's a dolphin. And so some of those activities give you a clue as to the identity of the whales. And then if all of those don't help, body shape will help as well along the size. So the largest whales are clearly identifiable from the smaller ones. It's surprising the range of whales that are out there, isn't it? So again, if we're fortunate, we'll be able to see some of these different aspects of the whales and hopefully do a bit of identification. Now, what I did was not really right to do to you. I should have had the names perhaps of each whale that was there. But I was trying to sort of simulate what happens when you're looking from the ship and you don't have the names written on the side of the screen as you're looking at the whale. So instead, quite often identifying charts are used. And this one here is fairly complex and has a lot of whales on it. But you can see that one of the techniques used to identify species is the blow. And you can see the different shapes there. Hopefully we will see a blue whale. There are fin whales in the area. The sei whale. These look very similar, don't they? So they're not uniquely identifiable. The humpback whale, its blow tends to get big and spread out very quickly. But the Brutus whale, the sei, the fin, and the blue all sort of have the same shape for blow. The sperm whale, as I mentioned, it blows off to the left-hand side. And the mating blow is similar to the others. And the killer whale just sort of has a big puff that hangs around it. It doesn't go very high up into the air. At the surface, you can see the different shapes. The blue whale, the longest whale on the planet, the dorsal fin is way to the back. The fin whale has a taller dorsal fin than the blue. The sei whale, an even taller dorsal fin, but it's a smaller whale. The humpback, this helps, but it's not identifiable. But it is this here that makes the humpback so identifiable. So if you see a humpback swimming along, and then it's about to dive, before you see the fluke, you see this big curvature in its back. And that is the reason why the humpback has the name humpback. The Brutus whale here, again, a dorsal fin that looks almost identical to the sei whale. So if you saw this or this, you couldn't tell whether it's a sei or a Brutus whale. They actually look very similar anyway. The sperm whale has a unique triangular shaped dorsal fin, and then it has sort of a bulbous head up here. The minke is a shorter whale, and it has a dorsal fin that sort of projects backwards almost at 45 degrees. And then of course the orca has the tallest of all dorsal fins of any whale species. The killer whale is actually a dolphin, but it is also a cetacean, of course. When they dive, you can see what happens to their body, just as as they're about to hit the water, or about to dive underneath the water. So slightly different shapes. And then when you see their tail, the tail is fairly identifiable, especially the sperm whale tail, which is fairly solid all the way across. And the humpback whale, we'll see a few examples of that later on, very identifiable with a nice notch in here. Other characteristics here for humpback, the long pectoral fins. There's a lot of material in there. It'd be handy to have sort of that identification chart handy. Someone suggested that I pass that to Mikey and he put that in the Navigator app. Might be an idea. We've used the blow whale as we mentioned before. And of all the 8 whales pictured here, 7 of them are found in the Azores. Can you figure out which one is not? Sure. Absolutely, the southern right now here. So that's a good collection of different species of whales we found in a fairly constricted area. And indeed, the Azores area is fairly constricted. This is a chart from Newfoundland, and 4 of these top whales appear in the Azores. The bottom, the North Atlantic right whale, does not appear in the Azores. So this close-up gives us, again, another way to try and identify the whales that we might see, especially the big whales that we might see. And again, the blue whale, the largest whale, a bluish colored body, sort of they describe it as sort of bluish gray. The dorsal fin, very small for such a huge whale, located quite far back. Often the dorsal fin is located towards the middle or just behind the middle. And then it's got a very stocky musculature area here before its fluke. The fin whale, when I've seen them, you see this here, you see a long body and then the fin sticking out the back. Notice that the fin is quite a fair bit larger than that of the blue whale. The sei whale, again, sort of bluish, gray, more grayish than blue, and quite nicely grayish. The dorsal fin is quite erect here. And then the humpback whale, a stubby little dorsal fin, but characterized by the big hump when it dies, and of course these beautiful pectoral fins. For those who are really good at whale identification, they just have to see one aspect of the whale and they can identify quite quickly what the species is. So only the top 2 whales pictured there will make appearance in the Azores. The humpback whale, this dorsal fin has actually been chewed off probably by an orca. It should go a little bit further and be a little more pointed. And you see how the flukes look different for the different species? It's sort of hard to tell, but clearly you can see the difference between a sperm whale fluke and that of humpback. All these little ridges, this big notch in the middle. The gray whale, which we won't see anyway, has a little smaller notch. We won't see these 2. So the big 2 whales that hopefully we'll see here, the sperm and the humpback, and you can see that the tail flukes are different. And this I can't quite understand, but there are experts in the field. They see the splash and identify what the whale is. But when you see the whales after they've done their dive, they leave behind this ripple on the surface. And that's known as a footprint, and that's often neat to take pictures. Sometimes people take pictures of the tail fluke going down, but they'll ignore that little footprint. But quite often that footprint is just a neat, such a neat picture. Now, I've used the word whale, dolphin, porpoise, and even the word cetacean, but collectively these are called cetaceans. And so you may say to yourself, well, what does the term cetacean mean? Well, the Latin word for whale is ceta, And accompanying that was the Greek word for ketons, which is sea monster, because in the Mediterranean, when these animals were seen, they were considered to be monsters of the sea. So, cetacean, whale, and sea monster. Etymology is sort of interesting, isn't it? When you were in late elementary school and high school, especially in biology, if you had something like the humpback or the orca or the sperm whale or the gray whale, you would have to memorize the kingdom, fauna, class, order, family, genus, species, classifications, right? Because when you got down to that last thing, you had the two names, Linnaeus nomenclature, the genus name, and the species name. We won't quite get that far, but the same idea. To which kingdom do these belong? To the animal kingdom. And the word animalis is from the Latin, which means having breath. So animals are organisms that have a breath associated with them. Which phylum do whales belong to? And the phylum is the chordates. They have the backbone. The Greek word for cord means string. So that string of bones along the back of an animal. Sorry. The next is the class, and we're all mammals. And then we come to the order, which is where the whales were found. So they're a member of the artiodactyls. So whales are considered artiodactyls. So animal, chordates, mammals, and then artiodactyls. But artiodactyls live on land, and by definition, they're an animal that has an even number of toes in their hoofs. So how do whales belong to that order? Well, DNA testing has shown that there's a DNA relationship between whales and the artiodactyls is extremely close. And so it's something that's virtually identical. And so that's why whales, cetaceans, have been put into this order of animal. Now, there's a suborder, and that is cetacean. Again, monster, the sea monster, whale of the ocean. And then there's a level below suborders called infraorder, and that's where you get the split in terms of the types of whales that exist. You have the toothed whales and the baleen whales, the baleen whales. And so these two, the Odontoceti and the Mysticeti, comprise the infraorder. So it's sort of the second level down from order. So we have the whales, the cetaceans, and there's two types of whale. The ones that have teeth and the ones that have baleen. So here are the Odontocetes, and you can see that each of these shown here have teeth. And the Greek word odonto, referring to tooth, and cetus, referring to whale. And here are the species, 72 in total, of the toothed whales. In there you can see some whales, but most of them are dolphins. And what's the difference between a whale and a dolphin? Essentially, dolphins have teeth, but that doesn't distinguish them from the toothed whales, but it deals with size and activity. Dolphins tend to be smaller, much more active, and flipping out of the water. Otherwise, they're members of the same infraorder, Odontocetes. Then we come to the Mysticetes, and Mysta in Greek means mustache, and cetus whale. So these are the mustached whales because the baleen sort of looks like a mustache. And you can see here, this is the baleen of a humpback whale. And when we refer to baleen, that's what we're talking about. It's basically the sieve that when the mouth closes allows the water to be pushed out of the mouth after the whale has engulfed a whole bunch of water and fish. So it pushes the water out through the belly and it keeps the fish in behind, and then it swallows the fish. This is a great shot, I thought, because you can see here, this is the upper palate of a humpback whale, and this is the baleen here, And these whales have just finished doing a fishing process. Now, there's a previous photo showing how whales will swim along the surface with their mouth open. And if they come upon a bunch of fish, they'll close the mouth, and that's their fishing. But a couple of species, but most in particular the humpback whale, has developed a really cool technique. How many of you know of this technique? Okay, so for those of you that don't, it's pretty simple. Let's say there's a school of fish here encompassing a large volume of sea. And if a whale comes through, they might get 1 or 2% of those fish, the rest will scatter. So the whales have a really neat idea that they'll say, okay, if we coordinate our activity, and they do this with 2 whales, but it's better with 3 or 4, the whales will make a great big huge circle around the school of fish. And then they will blow air out of their nostrils. And when they do that blowing of the air out of the nostrils, it creates a sound and vibration, terrifies the fish. So the fish move away from that sound in towards the middle. And then the whales keep circling and making that big circle smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, until instead of having 10,000 fish in a huge area, you now have 10,000 fish in an area maybe the size of this stage. And then the whales come up with their mouths wide open, and they swallow as many fish as they can, as much volume of water as they can, and then they close that mouth, strain the water through their baleen, and then eat and swallow the fish. And that process is called bubble net feeding, because they use bubbles, and they sort of make a net around their prey. It's sort of a neat process. We won't see that in the Azores. You'll see that in Iceland, Greenland area, Alaska, down in Antarctica, but you won't see it here because the whales going through the Azores are not feeding. They're just migrating through. They might have a little snap on their way through, but they're not eating a lot. The big eating comes north, in the north. So there again is the baleen. And the baleen whales are called rorqual whales. That's a Norwegian word meaning a furrow. And these furrows here allow the whale's mouth to expand tremendously and then to close up again. So when you see a humpback whale with its mouth wide open, the furrows are spread quite far apart, and then it will simply close in. So there's 17 species in total. And all of them are whales, because none of these have teeth. So none of them are dolphins. Dolphins have teeth. So you can see the range in size of the whales, from the blue whale up top down to the smallest whales down here, the beaked whales. Now, when are the whales in the Azores? Well, this chart helps a bit. You can see that there's some residents that are sticking around for the entire year. The common dolphin, the bottlenose dolphin, the Risso's dolphin, and the sperm whale. The rest are migratory. They're visitors. So these are the migrant whales that move through the Azores. And we're going to be there May 18th, 19th, 19th, 20th, today the 18th. So we're there tomorrow, the next day. And look at May, and you can see that those are the whales that are going to be there. So we're going to be very fortunate, the pilot whale, the state whale, the fin whale, the blue whale, joining the sperm whale as the whales that will be there in the Azores when we are there. And hopefully, we get a chance to see some of that from the ship as we're pulling into the port tomorrow. This just gives an idea here of how often these species are seen from various whale watching tours around the islands. And so when you figure out, okay, will we see these whales here, the odds are against it, but this only means that these have been spotted when the tour watching zodiacs have been out. We also have people on the shore in these lookouts with binoculars and telescopes looking to the sea to spot the whales from different islands in the Azores, and they will then radio to the headquarters, and then the boats will move out to where the whales are. But what I liked about this statistic here is that a whale that has always been elusive for me in my life, the sperm whale, is seen about 60% of the time. So we have a good chance to see the sperm whale, and hopefully some others as well. Now, whereabouts are they? Again, the archipelago that we're visiting tomorrow, and for most of you have memorized the names of those islands. Geographically, we're going to be close to 39 degrees north, and then we'll drop down to under 38 degrees and go to San Miguel. And this is where whales have been spotted and recorded. So over the course of 6 years, the various spots where sperm whales have been noted. I don't know if you remember or not, but yesterday when discussing the Azores, I mentioned this island in particular. It's got that long, narrow shape to it because it was formed by those fishery eruptions. But it is also home to where last year, in the course of 3 months, there were 22,000 earthquakes. So it's very much still a geologically active area. And I sometimes wonder how earthquakes would affect whales because, of course, they're very sensitive to that. And if we're very lucky, as we move towards Terceira, which is located up here, maybe some of that energy will be transmitted through the ground. We might be able to experience a joyful little earthquake tomorrow in Terceira. Here we have San Miguel, and you can see the whales that are spotted both to the north and the south of San Miguel. And indeed, this is a plot of the different species of whales that have been found off the island. So there's a good chance of us seeing some whales in the Azores, and there's a good chance of us seeing a bunch of different species of whales. And those are the 4 resident species that can be seen. So sort of in summary where they've been located south of Terceira, which is the island we're visiting tomorrow. We're going to come into this bay right here. They've been found south of St. George Island, Pico, and Fayal, as well as south of San Miguel and north of San Miguel. So the question that is paramount in my mind is which route are we going to follow coming into the islands tomorrow? If I was in charge, that might be the route. That would be a better route because you're going through 2 whale watching areas. That would not be a good choice at all. And this, I think, is the probable route we'll follow. Speaking of the bridge this morning, it looks like we're coming in from the south, but that will still give us a really good opportunity to see a couple of things. One, there's going to be passing through an area where there's a lot of whales in both areas here, as well as if we're up early enough in the morning and the sun is just right, we might see the volcanic peak of Pico, which is right here, and that's the tallest peak in the Atlantic Ocean. It's the tallest peak in the Azores. And then the next day we move down to San Miguel, and the problem with that is we're moving out later in the evening, I think around 11 o'clock at night, tomorrow night, is that right? So it'll be dark, so we won't be able to see very much at all. But in the morning, coming in, we might have a chance in this region here to see some whales. Now, I mentioned that all of these whales here are the ones that are found in the Azores. And what I'd like to do is go through a very slow and methodical process of showing you how to identify each one. But we're down to 2 minutes of time, so I'm going to speed that process up a tiny bit. So are you ready for this? Okay, hang on. False killer whales, Brutus whale, fin whales, oh, sorry. That was true when you saw that. That is the feces of the fin whale. And of course, they have to do what they have to do. Fin whales. humpback whales, pilot whales, beaked whales. The deepest diving of all the whales, even deeper than the sperm whale. A number of different subspecies of the beaked whale. The bottlenose whale, dolphins, sei whale, grizzly dolphin, manic spotted. See what's called a manic spotted? Bottlenose dolphin. And here the sperm whale, the biggest resident whale of the islands. And that's people in the background. And then the most commonly spotted cetacean, the common dolphin. And also we get the beaked whale. Now, just to end, a couple of one little interesting tidbit that I think you'll enjoy. Last year, about a year and a month ago, this whale was spotted in the Azores. It's not an albino whale, it's a melanin deficient whale, pigment deficient whale. So it's the white humpback. Normally, humpback's rear end looks like that. His dorsal side, but this one looks like this. And it's known as the leucistic whale because it's missing most of its pigment, but not all of it. It was missing all of its pigment to be known as an albino whale. And then finally, the most famous sperm whale in all of the Azores is called Mr. Reliable. So called because he's reliable and predictable. And it's the one whale that lives here year round, and it's often the tour boats know exactly where Mr. Reliable is. And so maybe if we're lucky, tomorrow we might see Mr. Reliable. So I hope that's giving you a bit of an idea about the whales we might encounter in the Azores, and I thank you for taking time out of your afternoon.